This is the long-awaited HDZero Video Receiver, or VRX. I'm going to be walking you through how it works, what it can do, and give you my impressions from testing this new receiver. If you're new to the HDZero system, I'm going to show you how this fits into your existing setup and give you an idea of what it's like to actually fly with HDZero. And on the other hand, if you're somebody who has been using the system for a while, I'll be pointing out how this receiver differs from the existing Sharkbyte VRX. In whichever camp you're in, of course, I'll be giving you my recommendations on whether you should buy this new HDZero VRX. One quick note before we start, my VRX is white. I want to call it limited edition, but really what it is that this is a pre-production unit that HDZero sent me to test and review. The design of this and the internals are exactly like the one that you would get in the production version. The only difference is that the production one is black instead of the white color you see here. And thanks to HDZero for sending this to me to try out. I had a really good time testing it. So let's start with what this is. The VRX is really the core component of the HDZero system. It receives the video signals from over the air and displays them in the goggles so that you can see the image as you fly. It's also how you update the firmware on the VTXs. It's the single most expensive component of the system, but fortunately most pilots only need to buy one of these. The problem is that the only VRX option available so far has been the Sharkbyte VRX, and it's been sold out or really hard to find. I know it's been keeping a lot of you guys from getting into HDZero because you just can't find a receiver. Fortunately, now we have a replacement for the Sharkbyte VRX. This new HDZero VRX offers all of the same functionality of the Sharkbyte VRX with a few changes and a couple of new features. But most importantly, you're actually going to be able to buy one of these, so you'll be able to get them in stock in stores, and this is what would get you into HDZero. This VRX is compatible with any FPV goggles or monitors that accept an HDMI input, and it's also compatible with all of the existing Sharkbyte and HDZero VTXs. So if you've got goggles with HDMI, this is what you would need to get started with HDZero. The VRX weighs 80 grams without the antennas, and it's 28.8 millimeters thick, so that's the amount of added weight and bulk you can expect when you mount it onto your goggles. For comparison, the Sharkbyte VRX was also 80 grams, and it was about 25 millimeters thick, so this new receiver is pretty similar in size and weight. To actually mount the VRX onto your goggles, you can screw on this included bracket in place of the fan cover on Fat Shark or Skyzone goggles. I actually 3D printed a TPU bracket instead because I can slide it on and off of the goggles really easily, so that's an option if you're using the Skyzone goggles. If you have a different model of goggles or different brand, you can probably find a 3D printable bracket to attach the VRX, or you could even use something like Velcro to secure it onto the goggles. Next, you'll need to attach the VRX to the HDMI port on your goggles. The VRX has a mini HDMI port, and it includes a mini to mini cable. So if you're using Fat Shark or Skyzone goggles, then you'll be able to use the included cable to attach the VRX to the HDMI port on your goggles. If you're using different goggles or a monitor or something like that, you might need a different cable. So just figure out what kind of input you have on your goggles and make sure you get a cable that's going to work with it. But then you just take that cable and just plug it in from the VRX to the goggles. Pretty simple. Finally, you'll need to power the VRX. This is something that's changed a bit from the previous Sharkbyte VRX. This version supports a wider voltage range of 2S to 6S battery voltage, and it includes a Y cable so you can power both your goggles and the VRX from a single XT60 battery connector. But here's the change, and this is something that you really need to make note of. That cable does not include a voltage regulator, it just passes the battery voltage straight from the battery to both the goggles and the VRX. And not every FPV goggle supports 6S battery voltage input. So make sure you don't plug a 6S battery into that cable if your goggles can't handle that voltage. That's gonna be a bad day, and I don't wanna see you guys down in the comments telling me that you fried your Fat Shark goggles because you plugged in a 6S battery and they couldn't handle that input. Make sure you check your battery voltage before you use this power cable. Otherwise, I like this solution. My Skyzone O4X can accept 2S to 6S battery input, and so that way I can just use the same battery to power both the goggles and the VRX, and everything works pretty smoothly. But there is a little bit of bad news about power. It turns out that this new HDZero VRX does consume more power than the old Sharkbyte VRX. I think this is an unfortunate side effect of the chip shortage. I think they just weren't able to get components that were more power efficient to use in this VRX, and so unfortunately it does consume more power. To put some numbers to that, in my testing, the Sharkbyte VRX consumed about 7.5 watts of power, whereas the new HDZero VRX consumed about 11.3 watts. And for comparison, the Skyzone Skyzone VRX by itself in HDMI mode consumes about 3.5 watts of power. So you're definitely getting a significant power draw with this VRX. You are gonna notice decreased battery life when you use this with your goggles, and that's just something that you have to be aware of. Fortunately, you can use those larger battery packs as long as your goggles support it. So as long as you're using a big enough battery and kind of keeping track of that voltage as you fly, you won't have a problem. But you should know that this one does consume a little bit more power. Next, let's talk about antennas, because that's probably the biggest change in this new VRX. First, if we look at the old Sharkbyte VRX, that one had 2 patch antennas on the front built into the unit, and then 2 SMA connectors on top for you to add your own antennas. In the new HDZero VRX, they've gotten rid of those integrated patch antennas and they've replaced them with more SMA connectors. So now you have a total of 4 SMA connections to add your own antennas. That means you could use 4 Omni antennas if you're only flying shorter range in all directions, or 4 patch antennas if you're only doing long range, or a combination of both. One thing that I think is a really cool addition to this VRX is that they've added this integrated rail system to the front of the casing. So there's some grooves on the case and you can actually get antennas that slide onto that rail and securely attach to the front of the VRX. Let me show you an example. So TrueRC has these patch antennas that are gonna have that connection actually already on them, and those slide onto this rail system on the VRX. So I've attached it there, and it's this secure connection that holds it on there in kind of a more compact way than what you would normally get. I've got a little cable here where I can attach the SMA connection to that VRX, and I'll go ahead and put the other one on too so you can see. So it goes on like this, and I just really like this because it makes it more compact. I don't have these antennas sticking out all over the place, and even though these are some pretty large patch antennas, because of that rail system, it's holding them right up against the VRX, and this just makes it feel like one solid unit. I really like the setup. I think it's a great addition to this VRX, and it's cool that they thought to add this to it. You're gonna be able to buy antennas with this mount already included, so what you're seeing here is a set of TrueRC X2 Airs that have this mount included. That should be available soon for you to purchase, but I know they're also gonna make the 3D printing file available, so if you wanna make something custom and print it out and use it with your own antennas, you'll be able to do that as well. So here's what I think about this change. Honestly, I was pretty content with the built-in patches on the Sharkbyte VRX, and I liked that this was so small and so compact, and I really didn't have a problem with having those built in. But I can really appreciate the flexibility of being able to pick my own antennas for the system, and I'm looking forward to trying out some of these more powerful antennas like this set of X2 Airs. It's nice that it's so easy to add that. You may be able to use antennas you already have, so if you've got analog 5.8 gigahertz antennas, you can just use them with this system. That's nice. And even if you do have to buy new antennas for this, the fact that they're removable means that you can take them with you to other receivers or goggles in the future. So overall, I do think this is a positive change. I mean, you're gonna have to buy antennas when you get this, so keep that in mind. It doesn't come with antennas, but once you buy those antennas, you're gonna have them and you can pick exactly the ones you want. Overall, I think it's a good improvement. Now at this point, you're basically set up to fly, but before we do that, let me quickly cover the rest of the ports and controls on this VRX. First, there's a micro SD card slot, which you'll use to record flights with the DVR that's built into this VRX. Now, if you've been using the Sharkbyte VRX, you'll notice that they've actually moved this slot over to the other side of the receiver, which is really nice because now it's not blocked by the HDMI cable. It used to be underneath that cable, and so it's really hard to remove, but now it's off by itself, really easy to take out. That's something that I appreciate every time I fly with this VRX. We also have a few other ports on the bottom. There's a firmware update port, which you'll need to update the firmware on the HDZero VTXs. This VRX comes with a firmware update cable, and you'll want to hang on to that cable because you'll use it to plug the VTXs into that port when it's time to update the firmware. Yours is going to be a little bit longer than mine. The one I'm showing here is from the Sharkbyte VRX, but you get the idea. There's also a new port on the bottom of the VRX, and it's a UART port that's intended to use with the new ELRS backpack functionality. I'm not going to cover that feature in this video. I might do a future video on it, but at the very least, I'll link to another video below, so if you want to find out more about what the ELRS backpack is, check that out. One bad thing about that new ELRS backpack port is that the HDMI cable kind of blocks that port when it's plugged in. I think you might still be able to squeeze the wires around to make this work, but It's kind of unfortunate that these two are so close. I really wish they had just spread those out a little bit more. And then finally, on the top of the VRX, you'll see the same three-way controller that the previous Sharkbyte VRX used for controlling the menus. This controller looks like a little wheel, but you actually push it to the left or right or press it in to select in those menus. I have to be honest, I was a little disappointed to see this control because I'm not really that happy with it. I don't think it's that pleasant to use. I mean, I've never had it break or anything, but I don't feel like I can operate it very quickly, and it just feels kind of fiddly and annoying. I don't spend a lot of time in the menus, so it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's definitely not a deal breaker, but I just wish they had used a different control for this. I'd love to just have like a set of 3 buttons or a higher quality joystick or something like that. So a little bit of a letdown, but not a huge deal. That's basically the overview of the VRX, although we do still have a few features to cover. I know you guys really want to know what it's like to actually fly with this thing, so let's go ahead and take it out to the field and go for some flights while we talk about the rest of those features. When you put the goggles on, you definitely do notice the added weight of the VRX. I really do look forward to eventually being able to get goggles that have an integrated HDZero receiver. But with that said, you do get used to it, and it's really not that bad. I found that after a few flying sessions, I really wasn't noticing that extra weight, and now I can really only tell if I remove the VRX and put the goggles on by themselves. This VRX also has a fan, which runs constantly to keep the electronics cool. I was pleasantly surprised that the fan is noticeably quieter than the one on the previous Sharkbyte VRX. It's really not very loud at all, and I didn't even notice it much in my flying sessions. So you have to accept a couple of trade-offs to use HDZero. Your goggle battery won't last as long, and you'll have a little bit of extra weight on your head. But if you ask me, those trade-offs are well worth it when you actually fly with the system. I have to say that I've been really pleased with the performance I'm getting from HDZero with this VRX. I haven't done a thorough side-by-side comparison against the Sharkbyte VRX, and that's something I might do for an upcoming video, but I've done a lot of flying with HDZero, and I came away with a very positive impression of the new VRX. I definitely feel that the signal reception at least matches the Sharkbyte VRX, and in some cases I think I'm seeing better reception with less breakup than that previous unit. I think there have been some tweaks to the receiver circuits in this version, so it's very possible that we are seeing better performance here. Even with as much flying as I've done on this system, I'm still just always impressed with how stable and clear the image is. There's no flashing or color shifting. I mean, a solid signal on HDZero is so much better than a solid signal on analog video. There's really very little breakup until you get to the extremes of range. In my opinion, if you fly with this, you're never going to want to go back to analog. Also keep in mind that this new VRX gives you the option to easily use larger patch antennas, so that gives you a lot of potential to improve that performance even further. With the X2 Airs, I was seeing better results in this environment with less breakup behind obstacles and at range. Can't wait to do more testing with different types of antennas on this VRX. I mentioned that we had a few features left to cover, and they both involve the DVR. The image quality of the DVR hasn't changed in this VRX, but now there's a microphone built into the unit that you can use to record an audio track with your flight. This is an optional setting that you can enable in the menus. I'm going to go ahead and switch to that audio now. I've adjusted the volume of this clip to match the rest of the video, but I'm speaking at a normal volume here. You can immediately tell that it's not great quality audio, and it picks up a lot of fan noise from the VRX. You're not going to get studio quality audio out of it. Even if you can't use this as a voiceover for your next YouTube video, I found this feature to be really useful. It's great for taking voice notes during a flight to remind yourself of what you're doing. Imagine if you took about 10 seconds before stopping each DVR recording to quickly say whether it was a flight you wanted to keep or not. When you look at the files on your computer later, you could go through and listen to the last few seconds of each clip to find the one you want. I really like this feature. And there is one more new thing about the DVR. This VRX includes a real-time clock, which means you can set the date and time in the menus and it will remember that and use it to timestamp your DVR recordings. This is a really nice feature, and it makes it so much easier to find the right clips once you have a lot of files on the card. I'm so glad they added this. So you're left with the question of whether you should buy this HDZero VRX. I think this is pretty simple. If you're new to HDZero and you're interested in getting into it, this VRX is going to be your best entry point into the system. With the Fat Shark Scout HD out of stock and the HDZero goggles out into the future somewhere, this is really going to be your best option to pair with a set of goggles and get started with HDZero. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that they're going to wait for the HDZero goggles to come out and then they'll make the jump, and I want to address that for a moment. I certainly understand being smart with your money and waiting for the right time to make a purchase, and that's something we should all be trying to do. But I also want to encourage you that if you're interested in HDZero and if you're excited about this system now, I would encourage you to go ahead and get this VRX and not wait on those goggles. We don't know exactly when those goggles are coming. We've heard maybe the fall, or it could be end of the year or something like that. But with the state of the world right now with chip shortages and lockdowns and things like that, I mean, it's certainly possible to imagine delays. And even if it is the fall, that's months away, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that time of having fun with FPV and having fun with flying the HDZero system. Keep in mind that once the goggles come out, you could always sell this VRX to somebody else to get them into the system, or maybe even just keep it as a backup. I really think that if you want to fly HDZero, you should just go ahead and get this VRX and pair it with a set of goggles. I don't think you'll regret that. On the other hand, if you're someone who's already been flying with HDZero and you already own the Sharkbyte VRX or the Fat Shark Scout HD, here's what I think you should do. This new HDZero VRX includes some really nice improvements over the Sharkbyte one, and I'm really happy with the changes they've made here, but I don't think this product is for you. I don't think that the improvements in this model are worth the added cost of buying an entire new VRX for your setup if you already have one you're happy with. Now, of course, you could sell your Sharkbyte VRX and get the new HDZero VRX as an upgrade. That's certainly an option, but I don't think that most of you need both of these units at the same time. I think the new VRX is really aimed at getting new pilots into the system, and the existing Sharkbyte VRX is still really good, and as far as I know, it's going to be supported by firmware updates for a long time. So if it was me, if I already had the Sharkbyte VRX or the Fat Shark Scout HD, I think I'd just stick with that for a time being. Maybe save your money for some of the new HDZero products that are coming out soon, like the Whoop Lite VTX or the Nano Lite camera. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. This was really kind of a part one of this review because I do intend to make a follow-up where I'm gonna test some different antenna options and compare them and really try to put the performance of this VRX through its paces. I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for that upcoming video. But hopefully from this video, you have a better idea of what this VRX can do and whether it's what you wanna use to get into HDZero. As always, I've got links down in the description to buy this VRX. Like I said, this one's actually gonna be in stock. You will be able to buy it. And I think by the time this video releases, it's gonna be in stock at those retailers. So definitely check out the links below if you wanna buy one. I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments if you've got questions or comments on this video. I'm always down in the comments responding, so definitely let me know if you have a question about this VRX. I'd be happy to answer that for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.